Yes, yes, yes. We're so lucky to be joined by both co-directors. But before we bring the co-directors on, I'm really excited to invite our moderator who's going to be doing the Q&A. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Derek Pitts. Dr. Pitts is currently the Chief Astronomer and Director of Fells Planetarium at the Franklin Institute. He's also been a NASA Solar System Ambassador since 2009 and serves as the Astrobiology Ambassador for the NASA MIRS/UNCF Special Program Corporation's Astrobiological Partnership Program. My goodness! Wow! One of his newest honors is an appointment to the Outreach Advisory Board for the world's largest telescope, the new 30-meter telescope at Mauna Kea in Hawaii. He appears regularly in the media as a science content expert, including appearances on The Colbert Report on Comedy Central and The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson on CBS. For more than 2 decades, Dr. Pitts has hosted award-winning astronomy radio programs for Philadelphia's own 2 public radio stations and created signature astronomy television programming for PBS. One of the highlights of Dr. Pitts' career was meeting President Obama and his family when he was invited to participate in the first ever White House Star Party. Dr. Pitts has undoubtedly received numerous awards, including an honorary Doctor of Science degree from LaSalle University, and serves on the Board of Trustees for his alma mater, St. Lawrence University. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Derek Pitts. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Good afternoon. Fabulous film, wasn't it? Incredible. Just marvelous. I have the distinct pleasure, though, of introducing the co-directors, Lisa Cortez. And I'm working hard to get it right here, Diego Hurtado de Mendoza.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Please sit. So the way we'll do the Q&A this afternoon is we'll take a few minutes here just to talk a little bit about the film. I have some questions I'd love to ask. This is really fabulous, and I've just been enthralled by what you put on screen here. It's really wonderful. And then we'll take questions from the audience, because I'm sure the audience has great questions also. So first of all, let me just say, I'm not sure I've ever seen a film that has put together these elements in such a complete package before. It really is fabulous that you've told this story in such a fabulous way by not only bringing forth for all of us to learn about the history of blacks in space exploration, but also to point toward the future so completely and show how the whole picture has been folded together in a really special way. I sort of think of this as being, in a sense, if I can say, it feels to me like the 1619 project of blacks in space. You know what I mean? And that's really fabulous. So my first question for you is, for whom did you make this film?
Well, there's 2 parts to that. Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's a tremendous honor that you elected to join us.
Oh, I would not miss this for anything.
Like the nerd girl in me is like having a field day. Well, first we made it for our participants. As we see, they are our elders. And it was so important to give them the agency to tell their story. That was very important for Diego and I, that we were not bringing framing to what we thought it was, but we wanted to hear from these incredible sources. So I think in a way we made it for them to document this history, because this film will be here when we are all dust. And then personally, I made it for my grandniece, she's 3 years old, and she wants to be an astronaut. And we all know the power of representation. And with this film, we are very dedicated to working with our team at National Geographic Documentary Films to get it into schools. Curriculum is being created. And so there is a big social impact, which is the end goal of having this film in the world.
It's fantastic that you've made it for them to, as you say, provide agency for them to tell their story. So my next question is, so first of all, the one word that comes to mind is that, in the English language these days, there's a lot of, colloquial use and overuse of certain words. And one of those words that dawns on me as I watch this is awesome. This is awesome. And I'd love to know, what was the story? How did you present this to the astronauts so that they would come with such an authentic, clear voice? And not just authentic and clear, but also so present and so honest and open.
I think Lisa answered partly that already. Our approach was, there's been endless amounts of documentaries, books, you name it, on the history of space exploration. And we certainly looked at all of it, we studied all of it, we read everything that had been published about them. But when we approached them, our goal was to let them talk. You're dealing with some of the brightest people that we have here on Earth. And so why would we go and decide what the story was for them, or try to frame their story under a certain narrative? So it was challenging, because when you're starting a documentary, people want you to know exactly what it is. In our case, we had to be bold and ambitious in saying, we don't know yet, but they're going to tell us. And so we just listened to them. That was the whole goal from the beginning of the project, is why don't we listen to them? And sometimes you just need to listen to people and then figure out really what they want to say. And so that was the goal. That's, I think, why you feel they're authentic, is some of them felt that some of the times certain narratives had been built around them, right? They're national heroes, their stories have been told for them, but maybe they were not participants in telling those stories. And so that is something we wanted to correct and do differently.
I think you really accomplished that.
Well, we had to wear them down, too.
Had to wear them down.
Some people were not easy to get. That was,
I know this.
And because there's been some other projects and they weren't happy. Mm-hmm. So, but we kept showing up and showing up with our passion for this story. And once we got one person, as you've seen from this community, they pick up the phone, they get on their group text, and they're like 3 thumbs up. Because they saw our intention was not only to document their story, this journey from 1963 moving forward, but also to ask some questions that people typically don't. What is this double consciousness look like of being a black person and being an astronaut, of being of service to your country, but not always being served as a black person by your country. And I think that they are at an age where they're ready to talk about it. We have a runtime of 90 minutes, but it could have been a multi-part series, and we've just started going on the road with them, and the Q&As are amazing because they sometimes even share more about their journey.
I, for one, would have no objection to a multi-part series. Well, just let me add that I think the pinnacle or the summit or the acme of your ability to get them to open up to you is Charlie Bolden's emotional presence here. We all have our sense of who astronauts are and what that image of them is, of which you did a fabulous job of allowing them to really show who they are. But Charlie Bolden's presentation of his emotional feeling is really spectacular in this. I think it's very moving and brings you to a clear understanding of these as people.
For us, I mean, you know, they're all absolutely incredible, and there's so many aspects to how we tackle this. One is that each one of them is an individual. And so when we looked at the project, even though you talk about black astronauts or African American astronauts, you can't just put them all in a box and think that their experience is the same. They all had different experiences. Someone, after the screening, some of the astronauts have, I mean, all of them have seen the film, and someone said, you know Charlie's gonna cry when he watches this because he's, you know, he always cries, but you made me cry, and that's way harder. So each one of them are different. I think for us, as Lisa said, showing up and being prepared and just recognizing that they're humans. And so just trying to break through that shield, that image, that, you know, the propaganda, that shield that, you know, makes them different, that puts them on a pedestal. And you know, they just want to sometimes just talk about other stuff as well.
Well, I think this is an incredible accomplishment in storytelling that you've done here, because it is such a complete picture that has this fabulous arc that goes, as I said, from the beginning, as you said, all the way up to Victor Glover, you know, like right now. And so I'm curious about some of the techniques that you used in this to create this. So, for example, there are contrasts and juxtapositions back and forth, one of which that really grabbed my attention was right at the beginning when you showed the diagram and layout of enslaved people in a slave ship. Yet you then showed how astronauts are positioned in a space capsule. And that really came across to me about how you paid attention to making these connections and setting up these contrasts and juxtapositions, and the way you went back and forth between Ed Dwight and the present-day astronauts. I think, you know, always seeing to it that his story is clearly woven through theirs. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways in which you did this as part of making this?
So I think we had a lot of conversations about how to balance the past tense history with the present, because the two have to be in conversation, because this story is not ended. And for those of you who don't know, Victor Glover is going to the moon. He is just, as with all the astronauts, really incredible. And as we were interviewing and looking at the timelines, historical, chronological timelines that had been set up to facilitate the interviews, we're also looking at these thematic elements, you know, that we can zoom in and out on, i.e., you know, the launch in '68 and Reverend Abernathy and the Poor People's Campaign being there, and that conversation, which is still happening now, about like all the money that goes into space exploration. We need that money in our schools and our infrastructure. And so it was really important because those are the conversations that we as a community are having and that our astronauts are having. But there was also this interest in incorporating Afrofuturism, incorporating, as you know, the connection that African peoples have had to the cosmos. So even though we've been fed a history that says that, you know, white men with crew cuts started this whole exploration thing, you know, we as navigators, whether it is willful or not, but have always seen ourselves and seen the possibility that space offers. So all of those threads come together, you know, the chronological, the thematic, and then the kind of thematic pullouts.
How you pulled these elements together to make this all.
Yeah, the silhouetted figures are by a South African artist, and then the animated figures with the stars, and then we're seeing different, those are from Zulu artists who created that.
Great stuff. I really enjoyed it. Some of the other things I noticed that I thought were really fabulous in this, just a little production thing for me, is that the music is beautiful in this. Absolutely beautiful in this. You know, kids write all of the proper emotional notes at the right time and all those other sorts of things, and it accompanies really well. And then the other thing I really liked about it was at no time was the music overriding the main voices, which I really appreciated. So thank you very much for doing that.
Well, that was the wonderful work of our composers, and it was a duo. It was Jean-Yves Bontemps, who just did, for those that don't know him, you should look him up. He just did the score of the latest Transformers movie, and it was a huge project. So we were lucky to get him right before he's become a superstar.
Perfect.
And he partnered up with someone he regularly collaborates with, Anna Druvich, and she's Russian of origin. So it was a great also team to have working together.
It all came out so well. So we're going to go to the audience in a moment, but I wanted to ask you, how long did it take to produce this?
Start, stop, COVID.
Yeah, you had a pandemic in the middle.
You know, like who knows what year it is.
Let's say it should have been maybe 3 years, probably 5.
Excellent, very good. And so, in its release, you talked a little bit about education, outreach, and things like that. How else can we find this, or where else will it be distributed? And what would be your ultimate dream for its distribution?
So this film will be screening at festivals through this year. Next year it will premiere on National Geographic, their linear channel, but also Disney Plus. And at that point, the curriculum will be shared to accompany the release on those platforms around the world. My ultimate dream is for it to screen on the ISS. Because we just got to take it to the universe.
Sure.
And any passing folks out there will look in and say, yes, I see my people in this film.
That's great. Okay. And perhaps some science museums around the country?
Yes, we also have science museums, and we have the opportunity to come back and screen here at your museum. And Guy Bluford. We have incredible partners on this with Nat Geo. They see the values of this story.
So let's talk. So, I have some dates I'm thinking about.
Okay, I will connect you with Ms. Kenya, who's with us. And, Guy Bluford, who is our first, he is from Philadelphia. He is a proud Philadelphian. And this August is the 40th anniversary of his flight. Yeah.
Excellent. That's right. Fabulous. Okay, so, let's talk to our audience. Folks, if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. Please, let's start right here.
Hello, my name is David. First, I just want to thank you for sharing this project with us and for the level of intention and care that you brought to it. Genuinely, thank you for your labor. My question is in reference to your earlier comment about listening to your participants and kind of finding the story within what they shared. And I'm kind of curious if you can talk more about your philosophy and your approach to the editing in terms of shaping the narrative. And it seems like ending on legacy was a deliberate choice, and I'm kind of interested in seeing how you kind of cut things down.
These persons have had such a rich, multi-layered life. And in the case of Guy, being an astronaut is the least important thing for him. And when we finally got our interview, we started out with one day, and because the exchange was so rich, it went to 3 days. 3 days with an introvert, I feel like score. We start with the questions that, are where you're born, school, parents, journey, blah, 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 blah. And then as things warm up, it really organically develops into a space of talking about the more complicated nuances of his life and his thoughts on what he's been a part of. And legacy was something that came up very early in this. We were very lucky to work with Leland Melvin, who's a former astronaut, who's our executive producer. And as we talked about and ideated on the project, he always talked about what he got from Charlie and what Charlie got from Ron McNair. You know, it's a community that is very aware of there's so few of them, and it is about looking out for one another and lending that hand, as Charlie says, to make certain, not that just one person flies, but making certain that 2, 3, 4, that Jessica now, you know, that Stephanie, and that's something that even to this day, Guy is like, I'm really concerned when Jessica's gonna fly again. You know, like he literally ponders things like that, and it says so much about how we do take care of one another and how we should.
Because I'm keenly aware that while you were doing the space race, you were doing the Little Richard documentary and the Beth Ann Harden documentary, which will air, will screen tonight as part of Black Star this evening. 3 documentaries, Lisa, at the same time. Does that explain why I haven't seen you in a while? Okay, so I want to know about the challenges, and I loved seeing Sun Ra. I loved, you know, because space is the place. We've been there a long time. We've been, like you said, the connection, as Derek mentioned, to the cosmos and Africa. So about 3, 4, 5 things I've mentioned. Thank you. Congratulations.
Well, I am a proud 215 Philly person. My mother was born here, my grandfather was a Temple, so I'm very connected to the city. And multiple projects, they start, they stop, there's a pandemic, and then there's a perfect storm in 2023 when they all come out. It's been fantastic to have this film premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival, and to have Invisible Beauty and Little Richard at Sundance. So it's truly a blessing as a filmmaker. I'll give one challenge, which is it's so big, and there were many more stories to be told, but our sweet spot for our edit was 90 minutes. And so that's always the challenge of what stories make it, and you know, which of our darlings will hopefully be resuscitated in another form in another time.
Right here on the end, and then I see all the way in the back, 2 in the back.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, thank you for mentioning this film.
Are they now so far away from that time period to allow you to reveal the path that these astronauts took?
To show their dirty draws?
Yeah.
Is that what you want to know, please? They know their history, and you can't sugarcoat it. They have seen this film. The current NASA administrator, you know, the PR folks. They have a very strong PR team there. And they love it, and they're supporting it now, and they supported it as we made it, to not only give us access to archive. We spent, I don't know, 10 days filming, you know, crawling into capsules and everything in Houston, and the support is really fantastic. They're a great partner, and it's the truth. So that's what our job is, to tell the truth with the work, and they supported it.
I can add a piece to that. I spend a lot of time in and out of NASA for a lot of different stuff. One of the obligations I have is to attend little conferences that they have every now and then. Every other year, beginning probably 4 years ago now, NASA has been hosting a conference for all of its grant awardees. I have several NASA grants for national outreach programs and stuff like that, and I attended this conference last year called Better Together. And I tried to, when I first got there, I thought it was just an opportunity for grant recipients to talk about their projects. What it was NASA purposefully reaching out to all the folks to whom it has awarded funding for education programs to make sure that they get the message that NASA is now an agency in which diversity is extraordinarily important to their mission. And what they say is that the propaganda line is that we have serious challenges ahead of us in the exploration of space, and we need all of the talent we can find to help us solve these problems. And I heard this from one person, and then I listened to see if anybody else said it. And then I purposely went up the chain of everyone I could find from NASA administration at this conference and asked them about that. And they all said the same thing. They all had the same line. And as I thought about that, mixed with other experiences I've had with NASA, I've come to actually sort of see that they really believe this. Because at one point in my travels to Jet Propulsion Labs in California, I've been there 4 times for various things. First time I went there, I saw no people of color and 1 or 2 women. The second time I went there, no people of color, another 2 women. The last time I was there, it seemed as if about 35% of the staff was women, and I saw the rarest thing I've ever seen ever. In the control room for all of the space probes that are out in space, and there are many space probes out there, I saw the rarest thing, a black engineer at a console monitoring one of these space probes. I had to stop everything else I was doing, as if I was on safari, and take a picture, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But my point is that, as I go through NASA, I see that NASA is hiring more and more people of color, particularly, believe it or not, in administrative positions. Women in administrative positions. If you dig through, you'll find that they really are pushing in this direction because they really believe they need the talent from everywhere. From everywhere. So this gentleman right here at the top, I think.
Thank you for the question. There was certainly so much archive. I mean, we researched the film even before we began the editing. We already had compiled endless amount of stuff that's been produced about the space program, and NASA documented absolutely everything, every mission. So there were hours and hours, and also on the Soviet side, same thing had happened for Arnaldo. So we had a lot of material. And as we began looking at the story, and as we said earlier, we would talk to one of the characters. It kind of started with Arnaldo and with Ed. And as we went to one of them, they would say, well, you know, after Ed, the first person that flew was Guy. But you can't tell the story of Guy without the story of Fred and Ron. And you go to Fred, and Fred Gregory said, I have a condition to participate in, that you gotta tell the story of Robert Lawrence that people don't know about, and he's my hero. And so we said, okay, that's wonderful, that's an amazing story. And so everything kept even expanding and expanding and expanding. And then at one point, NASA also got really excited about the project and said, well, we may be able to give you access to some of these active astronauts, which are, you know, extremely busy and their agendas are impossible. And but they managed to give us some time. And so now there's this other layer. And as it expanded, we had a wonderful team also at the Kennedy Marshall. And so they helped us come through all these endless hours of material and shape it in, you know, into these 90 minutes. But it was definitely so much material. I don't know the exact number of hours, but...
Oh, it's crazy. Like that drive that they gave. It kept failing for me. I couldn't even get into it because there's like so much info there. I believe that based on this film's life, there are people who are talking to some of the astronauts about narrative takes on their stories. Yeah.
Before you start, there's a young lady right here that's going to go before you. Go ahead.
We had that vision. We had to sell it to a lot of people. And I think what was really funny is they said, you know, once you connect, what did they tell us? We had 5 minutes or 10 minutes. half of the time you lose because of the relay to the space. So, like, you ask a question, and then 30 seconds later, Jessica would answer. But, you know, how do we complete Ed's journey? And it was very important to really take us outside of the Earth and show the impact of his struggles on even someone who is in space right now. I think Victor, as the facilitator, just kind of, we saw naturally, you know, how he reveres the ones before him, but he is, you know, an active astronaut and connected to Jessica and Stephanie and all the folks. So it just felt like it was necessary to bring them all together.
That last scene has a couple of things that I love. One is that Victor very much is, as he talked about the ones that came before him and said how important it is, and you see he's the one that kind of brought everyone together. You know, it's the younger generation, the OGs, the older gentlemen, we're you know, alone. And so maybe it was harder to create that community, but for the youngsters, it's so much more important to use all that knowledge, all that, you know, accumulated wisdom. And so he's the one that brought everyone together. And he says, when I came back from my mission in space, I wanted to make sure I would be the one doing that for the next one. So that's Jessica. So he's focused on continuing that legacy. And the other thing is that for us, it's really exciting. There is a layer of information there that's not quite easy to understand, but it will be in a few years. Jessica, Ed would have been the first black person on the moon, because at the time when he trained, he would have gone to the moon, right? Jessica is scheduled to go to the moon and be the first person of color and the first woman to walk on the surface of the moon.
Yes.
So,
yes.
in a few years when that happens, you'll be seeing the connection that's happening in that scene.